Hello and welcome to this Learn Live event. Today we're going to talk about lifecycle management and governance for Microsoft Teams. My name is Ståle Hansen. I'm the CEO of Cloudway. I'm a Microsoft Regional Director and a Microsoft MVP. Together with me today, I have Martina Grom. Maybe, Martina, you can do a short introduction of yourself.
Yes, and thanks. So my name is Martina Grom. I'm the CEO of At Work. I'm an MVP for Azure and Microsoft 365, and I love the cloud. And I'm so happy that you are here. And today is one of my favorite topics. It's lifecycle management and it's governance. So learn with us live.
Absolutely. And you can join us at aka.ms Learn TV or YouTube, Twitch. You can ask questions even, because we do have moderators that will answer your questions live. Juan, Carlos, and Miguel, both are MVPs, and they are joining us here today and helping us answer those questions. So whatever you have, what kind of questions you have, if you want links to docs articles, whatever, please ask that question. And they may even bubble up some questions to me and Martina, which we can answer live in this live show. So you can also follow along using the link, scan the QR code, and follow along on this live module. And after we have gone through this live module, you should be able to ace that module. So Martina, let's walk us through the learning objectives for today.
Yes, and again, don't be shy. Please ask your questions. We are really keen to hear your questions, and especially life experience, what you have with your lifecycle management and your governance, and how are you doing? So just let us know. So what we will do today is, first of all, we go through lifecycle management for Microsoft Teams. So what it is, why it's important, and why we need it. And then we go into Microsoft 365 Groups governance features for Teams. Microsoft 365 Groups are the base for every team we are using currently. So it's really important to have a good governance in place. And then we go into policy assignments for different scenarios. So if you're using Microsoft Teams, you want to assign policies for your users and in different scenarios. And then we will create and manage policy packages for Microsoft Teams, and we'll manage them as well. And our next topic is controlling Microsoft Teams. So who gets preview features, who gets not? So probably you have a champions program in place and you want to get them preview features in your Teams client. We will let you know how you can do that. And then we go into create and manage team templates. Team templates are really useful in your day-to-day work when you set up a new team and you use that. Ståle, are you using Teams templates? I just used one today in the morning when setting up a new project team.
Absolutely. And templates are a great way to get your teams deployed the same way every time. So absolutely.
So again, please don't be shy. This is a live interactive session. So please make sure you head over, say hi, ask any questions, share your real life experience. We can learn together in this module and go walk through that live session. So first of all, we go into planning for lifecycle management. And that means Teams provides a rich set of tools to implement collaboration lifecycle management processes for your organization. So planning for lifecycle management is very important because it means you're building a plan to get your work done effectively. Most projects consist of a beginning, middle, and an end, like it's everywhere. So what we can do here is projects can be constructed and used in different kind of ways, that it's not always obvious which stage of their life cycle they are in. So it's good to have a plan, what you will do in lifecycle management with your Microsoft Teams strategy. So think about that. If you have a project team and you walk through all the different stages of the project, and then you are at the end stage and you need to archive the team or anything else. So when we look at that, we have a couple of concepts for lifecycle management. So one of the concepts is that affects the decisions you make for your lifecycle management. So first of all, a team is a collection of people and content and tools for collaboration. The team defines who its members are and the permissions and policies that apply to those members. So everything in the team is also a part of a lifecycle policy. Teams are built on Microsoft 365 groups, and changes to Microsoft 365 group membership sync to the team. So that means you have an interaction here. And like other Microsoft 365 groups, teams come auto-provisioned with an Exchange mailbox, a SharePoint site, a OneNote notebook, and other assets within Microsoft 365 or Office 365. So we have 3 types of teams. There's an org-wide team. So an org-wide team might be very practical for smaller organizations. It provides an automatic way for everyone in a small to medium-sized organization to be part of a single team for collaboration. So currently, do we have an org-wide team in a middle-sized organization? Then we have public teams. And public teams are open, and anyone within the organization can join the public team. And then we also have private teams. So private teams consist only of invited users, and access is restricted to private teams. And that means we have that system we need to cover in our lifecycle management. And within teams, we have channels. And channels are collaboration spaces within a team where work is done. So for each channel, a folder is automatically created on the SharePoint site. You can store your files there, you can add apps there, and so on. And what types of channels do we have? We have the standard channel, like General. General is the one and only channel you can't delete in every team. Don't even try, it doesn't work. But other standard channels are visible to all team members, and everyone can be part of that. And then we have private channels. Private channels are similar to standard channels, but they restrict to a limited set of your members within the teams, and only they can access the team. And the third part we have here are shared channels. Shared channels are pretty new and will be available in the future. So those enable you to share channels with any user group with Azure Active Directory identity for your organization. So you can share channels around your organization and keep them in the loop if you need that. And then we have user types and admin roles. And our user types we have in here is we have one team creator. So those person has the permission to create a group or team in the directory, can create it in Microsoft 365 Admin Center, in Azure Portal, directly in Teams, wherever. And then you have a team owner who manages the memberships and the guests and the settings for the team, who can delete the team. And then we have members, and members are the people who work in the team and create that. And guests are persons from external, which work with you on a project and so on. So what's your favorite part, Ståle? Do you use a lot of private teams?
Yes, sometimes we do, and especially for search, right? Because you cannot search and find private teams automatically, especially when we create those managed teams, maybe for a department and so on. But what I want to mention around channels, though, is that don't create a team that should be a channel, right? So we don't have like thousands of teams with a couple of members, maybe multiple teams with the same set of members, because that gets confusing and you start chatting all over the place and you lose focus. So make sure that If this could have been a conversation in an existing channel, please do that. Or maybe it could be a channel in an existing Teams, please do that.
Yeah, and also don't produce channel sprawl. Don't create too many channels. So maybe just keep it in the general channel. So this is also some advice I give to my users and my customers very often.
Yeah, don't create like specific channels, like a channel for the event we're gonna have in February 2022. Create a channel called events and discuss all your events in the same channel, for instance.
Yeah, so for instance, don't create the channel for cold brew coffee, cafe latte, espresso. Just create one channel for coffee.
Or
So
warm drinks even, and include tea.
Exactly. So our life cycle stages, generally speaking, a team has a purpose that's aligned with a project or accomplishing a goal. It could be a department team, but very often we see project teams. So even if a team was formed based on shared interest, the team membership will probably change over time. And the discussion might grow only to surface again in a slightly different way in a different team. So it could happen that way. So each team has a beginning. When the team is created and the channels are set up, then it goes through the life cycle. So it's called the middle, where you create conversations, put up documents here, where all the collaboration occurs, and so on. And sometimes in the end, when the team has completed its purpose and reached the end of its useful life, you are asking yourself, okay, can I now archive my team? What am I doing with my team? Do I need the team? Should I delete it or anything else? And that brings us to those three stages again. In the beginning stage, this involves defining team's goals. What is the team's purpose? Who belongs on the team? Will the team be private or public? So the big difference is private teams are not visible within your organization. Public teams and all the documents are. Can new members add themselves to do team owners, to add team owners? Or who will have permissions to create channels or add tabs, bots, connectors, or whatever? And also, what initial channels do we need in the beginning, like coffee or warm drinks? And in the middle stage, we have the purpose of collaboration. So we will create workflows, we will add new team members, we will add guests, and so on. So in that stage, we will go, who will monitor our team? Is it used? Is it useful? Is it relevant? What metrics can we use to determine whether a team is healthy? Do I get answers and questions and so on? And then I see also what are the teams that have reached the end of their useful life. So teams which are no longer used, for instance. And then look at those teams which are no longer used and decide what to do in the end. So that means in the end of the life cycle of every team is when the project is done, everything is set, we do not need the content anymore, for instance, or we need to archive the content. So in this stage, you formally acknowledge the closing of the team and delete teams you no longer need. So that means if you delete the team and every owner can delete the team, it gets a soft delete function. So IT can reverse it up for 30 days. So that means if you delete the team, it is in a soft delete status for 30 days and you can soft undelete it from them. Deleting teams doesn't affect any chats or content that were retained in accordance with compliance policies. So for instance, if you have a retention policy on the users and so on, you will have the information still in compliance tools. Channels also have a soft delete because you can also delete the channel within a team. And the soft delete, the channel can be reversed for up to 21 days after deletion, and every team owner can do that by himself. And then think about when a group is deleted, a group or team is deleted, most of the information in the connected service is also deleted. So the mailbox is deleted, the calendar is deleted, the documents are deleted. So also it's important that you understand the impact when a team is deleted to any, if you think about data loss or potential data loss. So that means also consider if you delete the team, all guests aren't removed from Azure Active Directory. Why is that? Because probably you need the guest in another team again. So he remains in your Azure Active Directory. If we go into SharePoint, that means all files and Teams channels are stored in the SharePoint site. And that means also if you delete the channel or delete the team, the SharePoint content will also be deleted. Planner. If you delete a team, Planner will also be deleted. To keep the data, you need to export the plan to a spreadsheet, make a copy of it, take it over to another plan, or copy the entire plan before deleting the team, because this plan is otherwise lost and you don't have any more information here. Same goes with forms. So if you delete a group, you delete associated forms as well. So if you have groups forms associated within your team and you want to keep them, please duplicate it first, export the results in a spreadsheet, or just delete the form. And then if we go into Power Automate, that means if you create a flow with Power Automate and don't belong to the group. So they are owned by the creator and shared with other users and group. So they are not affected if you delete the team. They are only affected if you delete the user. Then you have to take care about the flow. Power BI, they can operate independently from groups and teams. So if you need the report once the group or team is deleted, it can be copied from the existing workspace to another workspace as well. And Dataverse for Teams is also, if the team is deleted, the Dataverse for Teams environment that was created will also be deleted. So Dataverse for Teams environment itself can be deleted from within the team. To keep the data, you can upgrade to a database for Teams environment, and the upgraded environment lifecycle will no longer be tied to the lifecycle of that team. Also keep that in mind if you want to keep data longer. And also the decision points you have here is please define what the end of a team's life looks like. So from my perspective, and probably Ståle, you have another opinion, but from my perspective, it's not a keep everything strategy. Delete teams if you don't need them anymore, but also think about what you are doing with the data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking if it's a project team, for instance, maybe the result of the project is stored somewhere else. But think of the team as where you produce and interact and collaborate and run the project, and then move the data somewhere else when you're finished, for instance.
Yeah,
but I think there are equally many opinions and possibilities as there are people using Teams as well around what's going to happen with the data after the team has ceased to exist. So, but it's something that needs to be defined at least.
Yeah. And the next important part after the long lifecycle planning process for me is you with Teams governance.
Absolutely. But before we move on, Martina, we got a question from YouTube. So when in the beginning phase, you mentioned that we should think about creating tabs, bots, and connectors. And the question was, what are connectors within Teams?
So if you have a connector in place, that means if you create a team and you add a connector there, that means you connect literally a third-party service into your Teams environment and work from there. And it could be useful if you have third-party services which you want to connect. So I did some examples with Twitter accounts just to have that included in my team channel, but it can be anything else if you want. Just try it out, what is useful for you.
Yep, absolutely. So, plan for teams governance. I think you did a great intro regarding like the stages and the phases of all teams. But let's look at like everything we need to think about when we are talking about teams governance. And we need to think about who can create naming conventions, guest access, expiration policies, seed policies, use of templates, and monitoring. We're not going to discuss all these elements today. Some of them we have already discussed in previous Learn Live. So go back and watch those recordings. And monitoring, for instance, we're going to talk about in 1 week when we're going to talk about monitoring for Microsoft Teams. But let's start with who can create and how should they create. So what we talked about actually in the last module was how we can lock down the environment and specify who can create new teams. Because being able to create a team comes great responsibility. Because you create a SharePoint site, a mailbox, a calendar, you create a lot of infrastructure. As Martina mentioned as well, what gets deleted when we remove a team. So think about like who can create and how can they create. What we typically do around governance in organizations where we want to have more control is maybe limit who can create teams natively within Teams, but we use like ordering forms or other means of ordering a team so that we have an approval process around it, and we get to create and use those templates as we wanted to use them. Maybe we want to add some additions to those templates, and Martina is going to talk about those templates later today. And think about also that if you limit Microsoft 365 group creation, you do limit creating team sites in SharePoint. You do limit creating teams in Microsoft Teams. You do limit creating groups in Outlook, because all of them are Microsoft 365 groups. So think about that, define that before you start. And it's never too late to change this. If you started with having this open and available for everyone, it's never too late to consolidate and think about who can do those creations. Naming conventions. You can add a prefix, a suffix based on what kind of team it is. You have some policies that you can apply where you can apply these prefixes and suffixes automatically. That is handled through Azure Active Directory through the Microsoft 365 group creation. So that's actually where you need to go in order to do that. You can even do block words as part of that. For instance, you don't want to create a CEO team or marketing team or HR team, for instance. Those words may be blocked to use, and also some foul language if you don't want to include that. It's up to 5,000 words that you can block, so you need to be picky and not like block the whole dictionary, for instance. So make sure that you think about what kind of words are blocked when creating those teams. And you will see it natively in the Teams client. When you're adding the name, the suffix and prefix will be added, and the users will see them as well when creating those teams. Then you need to look at guest access. We're going to look at, I'm going to mention some tools that we can use in order to control guest access. One thing is to adding guests, but then the question is, should they be able to be added to any team within your organization, or only the teams that they're actually invited to use? That's something you need to think about. And we need to think about like, how are we sharing within the organization or outside the organization? How are we controlling that? Are we going to be able to share outside the team? Are we able to share outside the organization through external users? And what's our strategy for sharing content within a team? As we talked about in previous sessions, we talked about also that you shouldn't create like granular sharing within SharePoint. You shouldn't like break the basic and primary sharing mechanisms, because by default everyone has access to what's within the team, and you shouldn't break that. So you shouldn't like, oh yeah, only a subset of users should have access to this part of the content. We need to use other mechanisms for that, and other mechanisms for that are private channels, for instance, and where you can create an area where a subset of users have access, but keep in mind that you need to be a member of the team in order to get access to what's in the private channel. And we use different mechanisms to do that. So how are you going to control sharing? Are you going to use sensitivity labels? Are you going to use templates to do that? Are you going to use the Graph API when you're creating that? And creating a strategy for having it created the same way every time is really important. And then expiration policies. I'm going to talk about the expirations policies later on in this session. So what kind of expirations policies do we have and how do they work? Let's look into that a bit later. When it looks to seat policies, what's going to happen with the data? What can we recover from the data? And keep in mind that Teams is built on Microsoft 365. So it uses the same security mechanisms as Exchange and SharePoint, both for retention of content, e-discovery, and even DLP. It includes usage of safe links, safe attachments, all that. Everything of that kind of activities and tools are also supported within Microsoft Teams. We talked a bit about templates. How do you want your teams to look like? And do you want to like create project teams, for instance, that have that support your project methodology within the organization, so that you get the folders, get the channels, and so on that you need when creating a project, for instance? Very interesting discussions, and Martina is going to touch on that. And for monitoring, join us for the next session. Regarding group creation, what kind of licenses do you need? And I think this is super awesome, actually, that you now can implement governance also for business SKUs. So Microsoft 365 Business Premium includes the P1 license, which means that you do get all the governance mechanisms that we're going to talk about regarding limiting who can create a team, regarding expiration policies, regarding suffixes, prefixes, and blocked words list. So all of that you can actually do within a business SKU as well. So you don't have to be an enterprise in order to use this governance, and you don't have to be a big organization to have the need for using those kind of governance mechanisms. I'm thinking if you're more than 20 people, then it becomes necessary to have some kind of plan around your teams, because you have a lot of individuals that wants to create teams, they want to work in a specific way, but already then is where you may want to limit that. So think about group creation, think about group naming, also P1 license requirement, but guest access you can do in whatever. So make sure that you have an E3, E5, or Microsoft 365 Business Premium, not the Business Standard. The Business Standard and further down Business Basic and so on, or even Office 365 Business SKUs, don't use those. Microsoft 365 Business Premium is what you need in order to get what you need in terms of governance. So think about that. Then think about guest access and advanced governance around access. So you can do Azure AD access reviews, and you can do entitlement management, which means that you can set up routines for, okay, what kind of teams does these guest users, for instance, have access to? So yeah, you give them access to your tenant. They are invited through your Teams invitation, or maybe they need to be invited in advance. They need to be an existing guest in your tenant, but they shouldn't get access to whatever team within your organization that has the ability to do guest access. Maybe you want to limit them to 2 teams, for instance. So That's what you can do in entitlement management. And then access reviews, you can see get asked about, are these guest access still in use, and do you want to renew them so that they can maybe get removed from a certain time, and so on. So, but that requires Azure AD P2 licenses, which is included in E5 and an add-on to all the other SKUs. And remember, security and compliance, that is at the core of Microsoft 365. And think about how you're going to make sure you are compliant with how the data is stored, how can you find it again, and think about the different security mechanisms that you want to use. And then we maybe have some questions, Martina?
Yes, we have a very good question from the live event. So what are the requirements to make use of our expiration policies and naming policies for Microsoft Teams? I think license-wise.
Yes, Azure AD P1, Microsoft 365 Business Premium, and upwards. That is what you need. So if you have an Office 365 license, which is either E3, or if it's an Office 365 license that is Business Premium, that is not enough. You need the Microsoft 365 licenses, or buy the Azure AD P1 license as an add-on to get that. And you need to have a license for all the users affected by this. So it's not enough with one license. You need a license for all the users. Even though maybe the feature is available in your environment just with one license, that is not the agreement with Microsoft, and it can be locked down at any point in time as well from how the environment evolves.
And we have another question. So, and the question is from Twitch. So, how can I restrict the take control function when presenting a PowerPoint via Teams?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, so it's not related to licensing and not even to the session today, but I wanted to take it. So the question again is, why is it not possible to restrict the take control function when presenting a PowerPoint via Teams?
You can though, right?
You can, yes. And I think the question is around if you use PowerPoint Live functionality, that you can enable the click-through the presentation in your Teams environment, in the Teams meeting, and you can restrict that. There's a little eye on the upper side of your Teams client while presenting in Teams Live, and you can just uncheck that, and then users are not able to click through the presentation in advance. So hopefully that...
And it could also be part of when sharing a screen, that people can take control over your screen. And that's a part of the Teams meeting policy. So you can say that externals, for instance, cannot take control over your shared screen as well. So both of those are possible to restrict. So have another look and think about that when you are... That and for the Teams PowerPoint Live, it's happening when you're sharing it. So look for that when you're sharing that, so people can't like take control over everything. And I see a lot of organizations actually have that limitation, that externals, for instance, cannot take control over your screen, and use that as a limitation.
Yeah, that's true. So, but then we start with Microsoft 365 groups creation on my side. So as I already mentioned before, there can't be any team without the Microsoft 365 groups. So it's really important to understand that. And that means if you manage Microsoft 365 groups creation, you have a couple of options. So there are many ways to create a Microsoft 365 group. We looked at to create it in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. You can also use the Azure portal for it. But users can also create groups in the primary communication applications in Microsoft 365. So that means you can simply go to Outlook and create a group from there. There's an own group hub in here, and you can create a group with there. Then, if you create a Microsoft team, you get a Microsoft 365 group in the back. So, and then you can also go and create a SharePoint team site, which also creates a group in the back end. So you will always get the same functionality in here. And if you create a Yammer group, a Yammer community, you will also get a Microsoft 365 group. And it's also important to understand, if you create a group from Outlook or from SharePoint, you are able to teamify the group afterwards. That means you can, you have an Outlook group, it's called marketing out of historical reasons, and then you need a Microsoft team. You do not need to create another team for that. You just teamify your Outlook group, and you are all set because everything is in here. With Yammer, if you have a community created, you can't teamify it from Yammer. It stays a community here, and you have other possibilities within the Yammer community. So that means while users can create a Microsoft 365 group from Outlook or other maps, as an admin, you may need to create or delete groups, add or remove members, and customers how they work. So the Microsoft Admin Center is the place to do this for an IT admin. So if you want to create a new Microsoft 365 group, you can use the Admin Center, or you can go with PowerShell and to do it from here. So first of all, in the groups page, just to show you how that works, you go into the group page and you create it from there, and you said, okay, what is the group type? So you can, for instance, choose the group type, Microsoft 365 group, distribution list, security list, and so on. And then you can select it directly out of the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And then the next option would be, you can create a group with PowerShell. So to create a Microsoft group with PowerShell, use the new unified group commandlet. So this is placed within Azure AD commandlets, and it's not called Microsoft 365 groups, it's called unified groups, and you're just doing it from here, like you see, new unified group, display name, give it a nice name, and then also create an alias for the email address of that group. So you can also do that with PowerShell, and you can do it in bulk with PowerShell. And then we have another important part here, and that means you can, for instance, if you said, okay, I do not need any internal distribution lists anymore, and I want to upgrade them into Microsoft 365 groups. So from that perspective, distribution lists have a very long history in messaging for organizing people into groups to facilitate communication and collaboration. But distribution lists are limited to email messages and available in SharePoint for distribution only. So that means if you turn a distribution list into a Microsoft 365 group, you add more collaboration capabilities to users. You can have documents there, you have communication in there, and so on. And it also has the benefit of keeping permissions and membership intact instead of creating a new group that you must add to your access control. Also think about that. A distribution list lives in email, and every new member who is added to the distribution list won't get the historical messages. If you upgrade your distribution list into a Microsoft 365 group and teamify it afterwards, your users can see also the history which happened in the group and can teach themselves and skill them up in the group. So how would you do that? So to upgrade distribution list, you use the Exchange Admin Center. So that means you go here into recipients and groups, and on the groups page, you select the distribution list tab. You see here all distribution lists which are eligible to be upgraded to Microsoft 365 groups. So first of all, you select the distribution group that you want to upgrade, and then upgrade the distribution group from the top menu. And also select upgrade to confirm the upgrade, and then it will be converted into a Microsoft 365 group. As an alternative, if you are living in PowerShell, you can also use PowerShell to upgrade distribution lists. For this, first of all, you must connect PowerShell to Exchange Online or install the Exchange Online module. And then you go and upgrade one or more distribution lists, so as you like it here, and you can also do it in bulk. So that means you can also pass multiple distribution lists as a batch and upgrade them together. So for example, if you want to upgrade two distribution lists with SMTP addresses, marketing and finance, run the following commandlet. So, and after you have done that, all the eligible distribution lists in your tenant can be upgraded in here. But probably in PowerShell, you don't know how to get them. And this is also possible. So you can also query through PowerShell and get the list of all eligible distribution lists in your environment to see, okay, what can I upgrade and so on. And after you have done that, you can simply upgrade them in bulk and have them converted into Microsoft 365 groups. They are not teamified yet. As a pro tip, you have to teamify them afterwards, but this is the first step. Create the group, then you get all the SharePoint, Planner, and so on, all the magic which comes with the Microsoft 365 group, and then you can teamify it as a last step. And then in the next point, we go into the management. So after the group has been created or upgraded, we can add members and configure the settings. And that means we go into our group like we have it here in the admin center. We can select people at the group first, and then we go into edit settings, such as managing members and owners, and then we can change group privacy, we can change the email address, or creating a team from the group. So you can do that all from that way. Alternatively, you can also use PowerShell. So we will be PowerShell pros after this session. So that means you can manage the Microsoft 365 group with PowerShell as well. Again, it's a unified group commandlet, so you can configure the sales department group to receive email from external senders. And if you want that, you just run the following PowerShell commandlet. And then think about strategies for Microsoft 365 group creation. I discussed that a lot. What should we do? Should we keep everything? Our users are free, they can create groups and so on, or should we restrict that? So we have here, there are different approaches. So one of that is self-service. Every user can do whatever he wants. You can also go and follow a managed approach, or you can step further into a management aspect. So that means you can have an open policy where everyone in the organization can create groups as they need it. It's most common. It's the default setting if you have a new Microsoft 365 tenant, and you use that functionality if you do not want to restrict group creation in any way. So your users are free. Then we have the IT-led approach. So that means the user can request a group from the IT department, which will lead them in selecting the best collaboration tools for their needs. So you will have a discussion, do I need a Yammer community, or do I need a team, or anything else? And you can also do it with large enterprises to control group creation centrally. So maybe you can also add additional information so that you see, okay, what do we need here, or we have a control group here. And then the most common approach is a controlled group creation process. So group creation is restricted to specific persons or teams and services, and this is kind of an ideal approach because it combines both worlds. So you are, from an IT perspective, you are delegating group creation to persons who know what they are doing, and you can build a process out of that. That means, so for instance, Ståle is my manager and I want a new group which is called Cold Brew is great. Then I go into a form and he says, nah, we don't need that. We all already have a group which is called warm drinks here. So what's your approach here?
Great question. And I tend to lean towards IT managed. And the reason for that, especially in a new environment, if you're just rolling out teams, when people are like settling in and figuring out what this is good to have someone coaching users. What do you need this team? Do you have an existing team that could work better for you? And as you said, should it be a Yammer group? Should it be a Teams group? And have an approval process around that, and have it maybe more restrictive in the beginning and then open up, because it's harder to lock it down after time. So it's better to be more restrictive in the beginning to coach users and then open it up over time. And there are multiple techniques you can use for that IT-led process.
Yeah, and that brings us to our first.
But I do have some questions though, Martina.
Okay.
And especially around distribution groups, I think the ability to convert distribution groups are great because it shows that you should move away from internally communicating through email and distribution groups over to Teams and Yammer. But are you seeing that you're converting a lot of distribution groups, or are you creating a lot of parallel groups? What's your take on that?
So what I saw a lot in the beginning when groups were introduced into Microsoft 365, I saw a lot of parallelism here. So, we had a distribution group, now we create a group, a Microsoft 365 group. But then if people get knowledge about how to do that, they said, okay, we already have a marketing distribution list and we need more content in there and we want to teamify that. The question is, can we convert the distribution group into a Microsoft 365 group and then teamify it afterwards? And that makes a ton of sense, because probably it's an internal group called marketing, where the internal communication and marketing people communicate all the time, and they move away from email-based internal communication and they want to use a team in the future. So I also had some customers who gave up distribution lists at all because they said, we everything have in Teams and we do not write us internal emails anymore.
That's great. And I think also you need to think about what happens when you're converting a distribution list, because then you get like that shared group mailbox instead. And it's possible for people to opt out of that. So make sure that you're moving over to communicating in Teams and not doing like a hybrid approach where you send some information over distribution lists and some information over Teams. So I guess you should think about that as well. And regarding the PowerShell commandlets, I think that's actually super confusing, because some of it is SharePoint, some of it is Exchange Online, especially unified group commandlets. Keep in mind that those are Exchange Online commandlets, and then we are using Azure AD in order to control like the group itself. So make sure that you are aware of which module you're using for each commandlet when you are thinking about using PowerShell for this.
Correct.
Yeah, those were my comments and reflection on that.
Yeah, and then it's up to you to test the knowledge of us.
Oh, yeah. So are you doing that or am I?
Please, go on. Okay.
So we have a question for you. John is the Teams administrator in Contoso Limited. So Contoso, yeah, everyone knows about Contoso now. Which Windows PowerShell commandlet should John use to create a Microsoft 365 group? And that leads to exactly what I was commenting on. Should you use a new distribution group? Should you use a new unified group or new Azure AD group? And what's the correct commandlet here in order to create that Microsoft 365 group that you can teamify as well through PowerShell? And then we have a couple of seconds here before you can answer. But what are your thoughts around this, Martina?
So as a Microsoft 365 group is not called Microsoft 365 group in PowerShell, I would guess for option B.
Yeah, I would say C, maybe Azure AD group. Why shouldn't that be an option here? And but also you can create a new distribution group as well, and as you said, upgrade them. Well, what will be the correct answer here? Think about that by yourself. Vote in our voting Mentometer, and let's see what you decide and what the majority votes are for this. Okay, I guess we are ready for revealing the answer. And the answer is B, new unified group. Congratulations, Martina. You were right.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about expiration policy. So expiration policy is when you are deciding how you want to expire your team. And this is also something you can add at any point in your environment. Doesn't have to be there from the beginning, but you can get started with this whenever you are ready. And the reason for why we want to use an expiration policy is to make sure that we are capturing old teams that may not be in use anymore, or they were created throughout the time where you created multiple teams, a team that could be a channel, and so on and so forth, like in the beginning of the onboarding of teams in your organization. And make sure, and I think we have covered this a lot of times now, that expiring a team will expire the Microsoft 365 group, which then expires all the connected services as well. This is what it looks like. You can do it for all teams, or you can do it for selected teams and add them to the expiration policy. And you can say how many days it should be connected to. And if there are no owners, and this is why it's important to have owners within all your teams, and that's as Martina mentioned in some previous sessions that we had, is that you should always have two owners, right? If one leaves, you still have an owner that can answer to the questions about the expiration policy. And you get notified multiple times about when it's expiring, and you can easily extend them. But this is something where you need to teach owners, what's the life cycle of teams in your organization, and we have covered that a lot. And for instance, if managers are owners or project managers are owners, they need to be taught what the best practice is around teams in your organization, so they don't get surprised when they get this email like, should we expire your team? And it's like a super active team, and it's the best team you have in the world. And then you get the question, should we delete your team? And they should say no to that, and don't get surprised of it. So, and I think that's plays back also to what you mentioned, Martina, that you can have some training for owners, so they know the best practices around teams and channels and so on, which includes the expiration policy. Maybe have a internal certification process in order to be able to order a team to be added to a group creation list, for instance. You actually need to have completed some training, which you can do through Viva Learn or your favorite learning portal, for instance. And also what we need to think about is that this is included in Azure AD premium subscription. So P1 is required for this. As I mentioned earlier, if you have Microsoft 365 Business Premium, it includes P1, and you can use expiration policies. And with retention policy, the expiration policy respects the retention policy, so retention policy wins regarding retaining your content after the fact, because remember, when the team is deleted, it will use the retention policies you have set for SharePoint and Exchange, both for group mailboxes and individual mailboxes, and so on. Because remember, Teams is based on Microsoft 365 infrastructure. You will get notified via email. Again, train your users so they know what's going to happen when you get that question. And you can restore the team. Both the user and owner can restore the team, as Martina mentioned. And also tier 1 support and, of course, global admins and so on can also restore the team, but only 30 days after a deletion. After 30 days, you can restore the content, but not the construct of the team at this point in time. So configuring expiration policies is well documented, and look into that if that's of interest. But Martina, you also have experience using activity-based expiration policies.
Yeah, and this is kind of important if you're going through, for instance, through an expiration policy. So that means if you, as you have seen in the screen, you have 100 days or 180 days, and that would mean after the 180 days, the team owner would get a notification that the team is going to expire. But, and it's really important to understand that if the team is still in use, the expiration policy will not fire. So that means if you are using the team and it's still alive and you have a lot of communication in here, you won't get, or the team owner won't get any notifications. So currently the notification expiration policy only fires on teams where you have no action in. So that means no file is in use, no chat in the communication channels, no activity at all in the team. And then after 180 days, the team owner gets a notification, okay, this team is no longer used, do you need it anymore? And you get the notification 30 days, 50 days, 1 day, and 1 day after. And you can decide, do I need to keep my team or can I delete the team? And then all your life cycle management energy, which we had before, will come into place, and we have it here.
Absolutely.
So, and then we go into Microsoft 365 group naming policies. And this is also kind of important, especially if you work in a larger organization. So you can use naming policies to enforce a consistent naming strategy for groups created by users. So for instance, a naming policy helps users to identify the function of the group, the membership, the geographic region, or the person who created the group. So everything around that. And then the naming policy is applied to groups that are created across all group workloads. So for example, if you create a group in Outlook, in Teams, in SharePoint, in Planner, or in Yammer, the naming policy gets applied to both the group name and the group alias. And the group naming policy is set up here. And you can decide between, do you need a prefix or suffix in the naming policy? So for instance, if it's location-based or anything else, you can create a prefix for your team, which will be created. And then you can also use custom blocked words. So you can specify various words that will be blocked in groups created by users, because people get creative and pull up the name of their CIO into there, because an email address is created as well. So you can also use custom blocked words in your team's creation, and that is really a helpful scenario. So if we look there is, if we go into the prefix and suffix naming policy, you can use a fixed string here. And the recommendation is that you use short strings that will help differentiate groups in the global address list. Why that? Consider people are looking at groups and teams on their mobile devices, and you have a very long prefix. You can't see the group name at all. So also make it a very short one. Then you can also use attributes. So you can use attributes from Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, like the department or the country or anything else. So it could be that you have my group in the department in here. And also consider we have a couple of supported Azure Active Directory attributes: department, company, office, country, title, and so on. There are also some unsupported ones, so you can't use postal code, but extension attributes and custom attributes aren't supported as well. So if you have a specific one, you can't use that in that. But if you take the department field, you're fine to go. Also, there are some things you need to be aware of. So total prefix and suffix string length is restricted to a maximum of 43 characters. So it can't be longer here. And it can contain special characters that are supported in the group name and group alias. Any characters in the prefix or suffix that are not supported in the group alias are still applied in the group name, but removed from the group alias address. This is just, you can't email a group with an unsupported character in the email address field. And if you are using Yammer communities, also there are some characters which are not allowed, like the @ symbol, the hashtag, and so on. So please keep that in mind and don't be too creative. And the same is happening if you go into the suffix, of course. Then you can use custom block words, and I always recommend that to my clients and my customers, that we said, okay, what are the standard words we don't want our users, if they are in a self-service scenario, that they can create teams from. And that means the blocked words, you use it with an file which is uploaded. It's a comma-separated value file, and just fill it in and upload it to Azure Active Directory. And how does it look like? So you configure that in Azure Active Directory. So you go there in the group section, and then in the setting, you switch to the naming policy, and then you select the blocked words tab, upload your CSV files, and then you can switch over to the group naming policy tab and set up your policies and have everything set up very easily. Of course, again, you can also do that through PowerShell if you want to automate that. For instance, it might take sense to update the custom blocked word list frequently. If you have other words you need to add in here and you don't want to do that, you can simply do that through Azure AD PowerShell and create it here. Also, the same the other way around. You can also remove those settings from PowerShell, from Azure AD, with just said, okay, we do not need the custom block words anymore, and we are removing them afterwards. And how does it look like from a user perspective? So what is the user experience with a naming policy? When the user creates a group, they will have the following experience depending on the group naming policies. They see a preview of the naming according to your naming policy as soon as the user types in the group name. Or if the user types in a blocked word, he will see an error message that he can't create the group. So that means if you do that, and also it's important, if you're a global administrator, that doesn't apply to you. So the naming policy is for your users only. If you're a global administrator, you can create any team name you want. So How does it look like? So you see here, our blocked word is CAO, and the user gets an error message in here where it said, okay, you can't use that word in your naming policy. How does it look like from the Outlook client? It's kind of the same experience. When the user enters a custom blocked word in Outlook, an error message will appear. And it's the same in Teams and also in Yammer. So the naming policy goes throughout the whole Microsoft 365 groups experience and brings you custom block words in here in your tenant. And our next section is policy assignments for our users and groups. Ståle, it's up to you now.
Yes. And I want to just note that, for instance, what you talked about just now, the prefix and suffix, what I talked about, expiration policy, that is configured in Azure Active Directory. But what I'm going to talk about now is policy assignment for users and groups in Teams. So this happens in the Teams Admin Center and Teams PowerShell module. And the different policies we have within Teams are meeting policies, voice and calling policies, app policies, chat teams and channel policies, and Teams feature policies. And all of these, or almost all of these, can be assigned through policy packages. What we don't want to configure here is that everything actually we are configuring and adjusting for users are configured through policies. Most of these can also be configured through the Teams Admin Center, so you can do it through a graphical interface. You can then assign them. And it can be assigned on the user level, group level, or an organizational level. And what's great with this is that this is how the Teams client is built. And we are not using registry settings and so on, like all the legacy applications, because Teams is a modern application and it's cross-platform even. So when you grant all these different policies, they get granted to all the clients the user is part of. And that is also important to remember, that this is assigned to a user and follows the user based on where the user is connected. So it's not client specific. So you have different policies for Mac, and one for Windows, and one for web client, and one for mobile. No, it follows the user. So this defines the capabilities the user will have on those different platforms. So I will not go into detail what all these different policies do, because that's like explaining Teams. And we don't have time for that. That's why we have separated this in different modules. But the most used ones that we configure are meeting policies. We configure calling policies, and typically also live events policies. Those are the most common policies that we configure and assign, because meeting policies defines if you're able to record the meetings, how can people access the meetings, who can bypass the lobby, and so on and so forth. Calling policies defines if you're going to have voicemail, defines how the routing of the call, and even caller ID policies, if you have PSTN connectivity, defines which kind of number you are showing when dialing out. But as I said, not all of these are you are able to assign through packages, because that's something Martina will explain as well. But keeping in mind that there are some limitations of how they can be assigned. But most of them can be assigned to groups and through packages. And you can do this through PowerShell as well. For individual users, you can use the grant and CS Teams meetings policy, for instance, and then you grant that to a specific user. Also, what we do a lot of is that we go away from individual assigned policies over to global assigned policies. For instance, if you want to use an org-wide policy, and then you need to go and grant CS Teams meeting policy, and granted, the policy you're granting is $null, which then blanks out the policy, so it will start using either a group assigned policy or a org-wide policy. You can also assign it to a batch of users, and we do that a lot in Teams migrations, for instance, where we assign dial plans and routing groups for telephony migrations for Skype, where we do this batch assignment up to 5,000 people. You can just schedule assignment of these policies, which is great. And then, of course, you can assign it to groups of people. But keep in mind that the order of how a policy is assigned. So if you have something assigned on a user level, that takes precedence. But if you have something assigned on a group level or as a policy package, that takes precedence. And then at last, the org-wide one is what's being used. So, for instance, if you have been in a pilot, you have been testing some policies and so on, the users needs to be cleared out of those. That's where you can remove the policies or do it through bulk, which you can then through the batch assignment policy. So you null them out so that they will take either the group or the org-wide policy if you change that after the pilot, for instance. And yeah, from a group creation perspective, you need to be a direct member, so inheritance is not a good thing. The batch policy assignment can take between 5 minutes and 24 hours. So keep that in mind as well if you are doing a migration. So typically, if you do a large change of policies, we like to do that on Fridays, especially during migration, or you're doing larger changes, especially if you're doing it for telephony, because it takes some time to propagate throughout the Microsoft backend so that it's ready for the users on a certain time, for instance. And that brings us over to policy packages, Martina.
And how to create and manage them. So our policy packages, so keep in mind, policy packages within Microsoft Teams let you control Teams features that you want to allow or restrict for specific sets of people across your organization. So that means policy packages simplify, streamline, and help provide consistency when managing policies for groups of users across your organization. So if we look at that, we see that each individual policy is given the name of the policy package, so you can easily identify the policies that are linked to a policy package. Teams currently include the following policy packages, as you see in that very large list. And we see here also the different capabilities we have here in our policy packages. And that means if we look at the table, we see the settings of each policy, the policy package before you assign a package. Make sure that you understand each setting and then decide whether the predefined values are appropriate for your organization or whether you need to change them to be more restrictive or open based on your organization's needs. So in the left navigation of the Teams Admin Center, select policy packages and then select the policy package by selecting to the left of the package name. And then select the policy you want to view, and then you will find them who are available. Also, you can create your own policy packages, so you can customize the policy packages, create it and give all the settings in the policy package on your terms. So for instance, go the same way, select the policy package, select clicking in the package name, and then select, for instance, the messaging policy and go to edit, and then you can edit the functionality in here and change it. And that also means with that, you're pretty flexible in your policy settings within Microsoft Teams, and Teams works on the terms of your organization and not the other way around. So always keep that in mind, what you want that. And then the last point would be you can assign the policy package. So that means you can assign it through PowerShell as well, or you go in the users page, go to policies, and then you go into the policy package and assign it to the user. Also, In our example, we see that we are assigning a primary student policy package to 2 users in our tenant, and then we can specify the users with the object ID and assign the policy to them. So also think about, you can go into manage users pane, search for the user, and then you can add them. So what you can do here is you can assign policies to specific users, to a batch of users, and so on. So it's really pretty perfect and flexible solution here. And our next topic would be how we can manage team preview features for Teams update policies. And this is really important, the little p in the Teams client, Ståle.
Yes, absolutely. I want to touch on this specific feature because now you can manage how preview features are rolled out to users. Again, it follows the user and it gives you the ability to test new features. And there are 3 levels that you can create through this policy. Either follow Office preview, that it's enabled, or not enabled. And you can create this policy, and this is what it looks like. And typically, my recommendation is to give it to a specific set of people and not like org-wide. And the reason for that is the preview features may sometimes break stuff. They may sometimes have new features that, for instance, other organizations are not privy to at the moment, which means that you're maybe trying to present something, use a very cool new feature, and then it doesn't work on the other side. So if you are like in a production environment, make sure that the ones testing the preview features are aware that they are testing the preview features, that they're aware that some of the features they are using are preview features. But this is really great for those champions. It's great for those who those service owners that needs to stay in front of the wave to see what's going to happen with the Teams client moving forward, maybe test some of the new features. I think a great example of that is all the different layouts in a Teams meeting, for instance. Those have been on the preview for a long time now, that you can test like the different layouts for how video and content are being shared within your environment. But make sure that like regular users maybe stay on like not the preview version, like for production, so it works for them every time. So you can assign this policy through the on the individual user, through a group level, or through a policy package. And also users can opt in on their own if it's available for them to do the manual opt-in. It's called a public preview, and they can do that through the Teams client. And you need to agree and be aware that you are opting in. And suddenly Microsoft came out like, I think it was a couple of months ago. It's like suddenly there's a P over your avatar in Teams. And we had to like figure out what does that mean. And it turns out that it means you are part of the public preview, so that you know that you are in the public preview. If you are, for instance, reinstalled your client, then you are out of the public preview. Maybe you want to enable it again, or you enabled it and shouldn't enable it. So it gives you the overview, so that you know where you are on the preview set of things. So I had to tweet about it. Like, now you know what that means as well, and now you know what the P means if you have it over your avatar. Which brings us over to Teams templates, Martina.
So thank you for that. And to add another comment on the preview feature, so what I've seen here, and it's a very good way to keep engagement with your champions. So give them the preview feature, that they get everything which is new in Teams. They can try it out, and they can drive your adoption and change management project because they see all the preview features in advance.
Absolutely.
But now we are going into manage team templates. So if we go, and what are Microsoft team templates? So they are built-in definitions of a team's structure designed around the business need or around the project. So you can use Teams template to quickly create rich collaboration spaces with channels for different topics and pre-installed apps to pull in mission-critical content and services. So your users do not have to set up everything by themselves. They can just use a team template, and you have a predefined team structure with channels built in and also applications which you have across your organization. And we have two types of team templates. So there's a base template. The base template is a special template that Microsoft created for specific industries. The base templates often contain proprietary apps that aren't available in the store and team properties that are not yet supported individually in Teams templates. Once a base team template is defined, you can extend or override these special templates with additional properties that you'd like to specify. So you can create the team template on your own, but some base templates types contain properties that can't be overwritten. So that means for the available base template types, see the link base templates and look around that. And then we have custom templates, and team templates are created by Microsoft. You can create your own template in the Teams Admin Center. Let's just take a look what you can do here. So most properties in a team are included and supported by templates. So in the table which you see on the screen, we have a quick summary, what is included and what's not included in team templates. So for instance, you can add, which are not yet supported, is a Teams picture, channel settings, connectors of files and content. But on the other side, you see here, you can add the team name, description, visibility, and other things around there. And currently today I added a project template, and it's really easy. So what you can do if you want to create your own template, you can create it from scratch. You can use an existing team or a team template, and then you can save or modify it to meet your particular and organizational needs. So first of all, go to the Teams Admin Center, go to Teams, Teams Templates, and there you add the team template. And in the Admin Center, you decide, I want to create a brand new template, or I go with an existing one. And if I have done that, I can manage my team template for your end users. And I can also create template policies for them in the Admin Center. So that means within each template policy, you can designate which templates are shown or hidden. So for instance, if you're a large organization and you want to create specific teams only for a subset in your organization, you just create a template policy for those different users in your organization. So how to create it? We go into template policies, and then we add the template policies for my users. I give it a short description. I can also set, okay, what is hidden, what can be seen, and so on. And then you will see, is the template available for my users, and can they choose it from there? And if you want to create a template policy, again, you do that in the Teams Admin Center, and you go here, complete the fields, template policy name, template policy short description, and then in the viewable templates page, select the templates you want to hide and select hide, or approve them to the users. So you can use template policies, and it's really a very rich scenario. I see it a lot in education, where it's used widely among students and for teachers and so on. So you can really offer a broad subset of templates to your users. And that means it's time for a wrap up of what we have learned today. Ståle.
Absolutely. So what we have learned today is now you are able to describe the lifecycle management for teams, or have an overview of lifecycle management, what you need to think about. And we talked about groups creation and governance around that. Like, what do you think about in the beginning, in the middle, and the end of your team? And what kind of techniques you can use in order to assign the policies and define what the groups looks like, and so on. We talked about policy packages. You know that you can assign them now on an org-wide level, on a group level, or a user level. And we talked about the preview feature, great tool to keep engagement for your champions. And the templates, which are great to get the teams created the same way every time. So that when you're joining different projects within your organization, for instance, it is the same type of templates that's being used, so it's familiar for you and you can work the same way. Thank you very much for joining us today. And now you're ready to complete the module. Use this QR code, scan it, and complete it, and get those learning points assigned to your profile, and get that win. So I recommend spending some time after this session now to just power through it, and then join us next time. That will be our last module that we will go through, and we're going to talk about monitoring. And monitoring is very important to have in place for learning how it's going, right? How are users using this? And it gives confidence for you to capture if it's going well or if something needs to be adjusted. And we're also going to talk about quality, like what's the quality of Teams meetings and calls. See you then.
Bye.